Hi everyone and welcome to this week's episode of Fight Chat Friday from TKD Coach Academy. This week we're continuing on our review of the European Championships in Porec, Croatia, and we're having a look at the female -62 division and the path to the final for Karolina Slodkowska. So stay with us and let's see how this one went.
Everybody, welcome back to this week's episode. So in this one, we're going to look at one of the juicier divisions in terms of names in ITF senior sparring. So we're going to look at the -62 division. So we did predictions on this one actually, and a lot of the people who we did recommend got towards the semi kind of stage and final. So it's
I think it was kind of not so many upsets in this division. It kind of went to form in a big way.
Yeah, but at the same time, then I guess some people weren't predicting Karolina to take the win. And even though she's been at the top of this division before and she's been thereabouts, a lot of people were looking at other fighters. So let's get stuck into how she did get to the final and take the win.
Absolutely. So we're going to start against Sweden in round one. I think her original opponent from Hungary was out, so she started in the main draw in round one against Sweden.
Yeah, so I think like starting off right away, Karolina is in blue here, and a big feature of her game is that tall body position with a good side kick, which is quite rangy, and she can carry it quite high. And I think a big feature this time is she's trying to get some angles on the hands and do a little bit of pulling. So pulling is something that we've featured recently now in our videos. So that's kind of moving around, try to get people to overcommit and then try to capitalize on that. And using a side kick on the angles there is actually quite unique. You don't see that too much, Adrian.
Yeah, that's very true. But I think, in her style, it's kind of an evolution of like the tradition was if you remember the old videos of the Polish style of movement and everything, and, this would have been something that Joanna Proprocka, the previous, one of the best ever in the 62 division would have like really employed and used to get to hands. And I think what she's using very well here is she uses that movement off the line to allow her to be first and to be on top with her front leg. And given that her side kick is very proficient, she's a high chamber, she stays tall. Adding that little bit of pulling and movement to it does mean that she's very, very often the one who is the leg highest. Yeah,
and because she doesn't step with it usually, she holds her position. When people step into her, like that half a second of needing to step actually gets people underneath when she lifts first. So that's kind of like a key to it as well with her side kick. But yeah, very, very, very nice kind of like angles and pulling, because I do think from based what we'll see it later, but there's some of the girls here were kind of struggling to, let's say, pin her down. Yeah, and to be able to throw some shots to get her to kind of like squeeze her into the corners and capitalize. You see it even here. It's just kind of like single shots with no real venom or threat. And then when people do come, she's on top all the time, whether it's the hands or the leg, and it's very visible for referees to give her the nod, let's say.
Yeah, and as we go into round two, where we look at last year's European champion from Norway, I think what we do see as well in terms of the use of the leg, because it's coming from those angles, she can use an awful lot of deception and disguise in terms of her movement to shorten the distance or lengthen the distance as she needs to. So as she pulls left and right, she's able to pick up the leg at a different distance. Now in this one, we're also seeing the ability to just kick at different depths, so longer kicking, shorter kicking, depending on what the opponent is presenting to her.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot so far. The first two girls we've seen, they're quite leggy, let's say. But I think the explosiveness and the athleticism of Karolina is actually very important, because she's able to then link the legs, which she's very naturally well able to do, and the ability to push forward with strong hands. I think that's the major key so far, that she's able to use the hands and be explosive with them to get in when she needs to. And then when people are thinking about her hands, she's able to use the legs really effectively. So it's a nice little, let's say, kind of like, setting up the hands to work the legs and vice versa. And it's a nice way to kind of put some pressure on your opponent and have them always on the back foot.
But she's patient as well. And I mean, in our previous videos where we've spoken about side kick, it's not a high percentage scoring shot. In other words, you'll throw an awful lot of them before you get a score. But she's willing to wait. And she's willing to pull her opponent. And when she does get one in there and the cards come in her favour and she gets a lead, Well, then, as we'll see later with some of the other opponents, she's quite a challenge because her movement is quite good off the line. She has this ability to change the distance, and whether it's going to hands or going to the front leg again, very often her opponents are caught trying to track her.
Yeah, she always has the two mats behind her most of the time, and just like we've seen there, the side kick is always there. She has a great ability to just pull it from anywhere, even in kind of like weird angles with the hips and things like that.
Yeah.
So very effective.
And then our girl Sarah in the semi-final.
Yeah, they've met a couple of times, so I'm sure there was like strategic battle going on here as well.
And the challenge is, I think this one is hugely who gets ahead, because both girls really love to use that pulling style. And, if Sarah can get ahead, I think it really lets her use the hands more. She can stretch Karolina's distance a bit. But I don't think she ever did get ahead in this match, and Karolina was able to get those early scores and force Sarah to try and find more imaginative solutions, which unfortunately, and Sarah will tell you herself afterwards, she went to hands from the wrong distance a couple of times, played it a little too simple, and got caught out.
Yeah, like I think Karolina, she actually, something that people may overlook is her front hand position is very, very good, because when people do come, the front hand is there, so she can almost like parry, let's say, or just have it as a defensive ploy. At the same time, the kick is ready then as well for most of the time. So I think you hit the nail on the head. The key of this match here was whoever got ahead first would have been able to pull around and have a bit more comfort and leave the other person come onto them. And just happened to be that Karolina got the lead at the beginning of the match, and that was kind of how the rest of the match kind of tend to go then.
It does become kind of a percentage game, doesn't it? In that case, we have, a feature of it has been the right versus left. And as people are exploring solutions to that side kick and what they're going to do about that side kick, if they're not first and if they're not higher, they're having to look at lower percentage shots. And we see with Sarah trying the blindside dolio over the shoulder. She's trying the back leg dolio underneath. She's trying to find an angle to go to hands. And she even had like a switch legs band-aid, towards the end of it. But they're all lower percentage shots.
Yeah. See, that is one of the problems when you are somebody who, like, your main game, like your route one is to use your hands. It only takes the other side maybe one or two scores with the legs for you to be in a big deficit that you have to have like massive work rate. And at this level, it's very, very hard to do, especially like we said, like here's an example of it where like if the other person is ahead and you have to almost force the pace, they can just pick you off if they're sharp off that front leg usually. Yeah. So that's one of the let's say downfalls, but I guess it's an advantage as well at the same time for anybody on the flip side of the scoring system, because like for example in WACO there's 1 point for a body kick, so people kind of like respect it less. So that means then if you do have a let's say a very hand focused game, you have to work much harder.
For sure. And I think the cognitive load that's there, from one fighter to the other wears over the course of the 4 minutes, where, if you've got your lead and you're working with that high percentage, good side kick, and the other person's having to think of new and different ways to work around it and to pull you off the line and to break your rhythm and so on. Sometimes just the fact that you're not having to think as much and you're just doing, the natural part of your game, I think that will tell over 4 minutes as well.
Yeah, for sure. So that brings us to the final versus Sam Del Rock, who is up from the minus 56 division. She won it last year. So she came straight into the final, which is a great job from her. I think she's very dynamic for the female division, even the way she's able to use that, let's say, what do we call that one? The trampoline springboard side kick. You rarely see that in the female division. So she's very dynamic. So this is kind of like a different match, and the strategy is a bit more interesting.
Yeah, I think Sam does seek out some additional shots. Now, she does lean very heavily into this back leg dolio, but her use of her front hand as she does it is quite good a lot of the time. She's kind of fishing the front hand inside the front toe as such of the side kick to make sure it's coming outside of her shoulder line and give her a chance at finding it. But again, it's a lower percentage shot. Karolina is able to carry the backhand low, and an awful lot of those, even though they're well timed, they're at the right distance, they're still sinking into the glove and not into the body. So I don't think Sam's getting a great return on it.
Yeah, most time as well, chances are maybe 1, max 2 referees will be able to see that shot.
Yeah.
It's not a very like visible one. So compared to the front hand that Karolina is picking off, or the long side kick. One thing I've noticed here as well is after hands, the girls are able to get to the dolio really well to the body, but it seems to me that there's way more distance to find it, compared to, like, I've seen some of the junior divisions, and it's like much closer in terms of actually physically being closer, and you have to kind of like squeeze it in a little bit more. I think it comes up here soon enough, where you see it's just way more space for some reason, and I think it's just interesting to see that in I don't know if it's a feature of the senior female or just this fight or what.
Yeah, either the front leg isn't pushing in as committed a fashion, or that the hands are being thrown at a medium distance rather than, medium and closing. But I do think as the match evolves, Karolina here is almost willing to take that back leg dolio attempt. Because, as Sam is throwing in that back leg dolio, it is, of course, leaving her open to hands. So, it's the kind of thing where you might invite the turning kick even to allow you to be the first one to get to hands, because as Sam is throwing, she's on one leg. If Karolina connect with the hands, then she gets the momentum and allows that, like you were saying, that dolio chagi score at the end.
Yeah, I think like that was one of the main features, really, wasn't it? Being able to get to the hands just that little bit cleaner. But yeah, that was one of the ones where we were kind of looking at, okay, maybe this could be a potential juicy match that we were looking forward to prior to the event. So yeah, it was nice to see that the same people are kind of pushing through again. But then I'm sure we're going to have people going up and down divisions in the next division and turning things on their heads. We've seen Mira go to 68 and winning that division, so we'll see what comes next.
Yeah, I think this division really was a story of Karolina wasn't really pushed off of her A game plan, and by that I mean like her plan A. So she was able to, to maintain that front leg first and higher, pull off the line to change the distance and adjust things to suit herself. Trade with the hands if she had to, but more or less just rely on winning the balance of the exchanges with that front leg to build her lead on the scorecard. And I don't think any of her opponents were, despite their qualities, able to force her to change her plan.
I think it's actually funny because it's like that ebook that we have of the 10 tips to improve your sparring instantly. I think Karolina's hitting like 7 or 8 of these right now. So that link is in the description if you haven't seen it. But it's just basic, solid principles that she's doing really, really well. And that's the aim of the game, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I mean, it will take some effort, some work from your opponent to push you away from your baseline principles and to force you to try things that are out of your comfort zone. So you'd like to be making your way through a championships, sticking within your wheelhouse and doing what you do well and what you do well. So again, it's that 80-20, the Pareto principle again, that, you're going to get 80% of the results from 20% of the efforts. So, it's important that you have that 20% figured.
Yeah, so I think there's a good few things there we can take away from the 62s and Karolina from this video to see what you can employ into your game. Good solid principles, so go back over that again if you missed them. I think they're quite evident and quite obvious, so definitely look to put some of them into your game if you're looking to level up.
Excellent. And so this week we're going to be chatting to our members around building a sparring syllabus, and that will kind of go back to those principles as well, just as we were talking there. It's like, well, where do we start? What's the most important things to start with, and how do we build from there?
Absolutely, so go check that out if you haven't. If not, we'll catch you in the next one.
Best luck everyone, see you next Friday.